Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. This video is going to get a little bit crazy, but it's going to be fun, trust me. I'm talking about the Presonus StudioLive 24 mixer, and specifically how I figured out a way to set up an amazing self-muting talkback mic. Let's dive in. Okay, I know you may be wondering, what are you talking about, a self-muting talkback mic? But let me talk you through some of the challenges that come when you do a tracking session. When I say tracking session, I mean I'm over here playing guitar, Tim's over there on drums, Joel's over there playing bass, or even more people. There's this weird thing that happens. Even though we've got 12 microphones on the drum kit, when Tim goes to talk to me, I can't hear him. Because the mics are expecting to hear really loud drums, his voice just barely comes through. So we either play the game of constantly yanking our ears out and listening to each other, or he has to scream, which is no fun, or you have to set up some sort of a talkback mic that each member of the band can speak into. Now, I've been in studios where there's a talkback mic set up and it's routed to all of our headphones, and you have to step on a button and that opens the talkback mic so they can talk. And that's fine, but usually people forget to use it and they end up screaming into the overhead mics anyway. Another solution is to set up channels on your board where you mute them while you're recording and then you unmute them while the person's talking. The problem there is nobody remembers to mute or unmute the tracks because you're too busy on a tracking session. That's the last thing you're worried about. But what I've found, and I got this idea from Mixer Man. One of his books was talking about using time code to trigger a gate to shut off all the talkback mics while things were being recorded. And it flipped a switch in my head, and I thought it would be amazing if we had mics that we could set up that weren't being used for recording, that were just set up for all of us to hear one another, but while we were recording, they would shut off. Because the problem, if I've got a bunch of extra microphones around and they're all routed to our headphones, and we've got them turned up nice and loud so I can hear Tim speaking, well, when he starts to play the drums, it's going to be way too loud because that one microphone that's picking up his mouth is going to pick up everything, and it's just going to be awful. It would be ideal if talkback mics are open while we're talking and not recording, and then as soon as we start recording, they're shut down. Now, aside from hiring a full-time assistant to man the mute buttons, so every time we record, he presses mute, and then when we stop recording, he unmutes them, I wanted to find a way to do that with technology, and the StudioLive delivered. Now, there's a chance what I just said didn't make a lot of sense. Let me walk you through the process, and as I do, I think it'll all become a lot more clear. The first thing you got to do is create what I call a tone track inside of your DAW, specifically for me, inside of Studio One. So I literally just opened a session, put on the noise generator, set up something with pink noise, I think I used pink noise, and then just recorded a 10-minute piece of audio that's just pink noise. Okay? Then I save that as a track in all of my sessions. Whenever I open a new session, it has this 10-minute pink noise track on it. The next thing you want to do, because nobody wants to listen to pink noise ever, is to route that track that you just created, that tone track, to a channel on the board that you're not using. So I've got mine routed to channel 32. The next thing you want to do is make sure channel 32 is not routed to your main output and is not turned up, so it's not feeding anyone's headphones, or you literally never want to actually hear channel 32. It just needs to have a signal present. Next, set up your talkback mic. So just pick a random microphone that you're not using. You can go buy a cheap one on Craigslist that you just want to use for talkback. Set that one up, put it where you want it to go, and plug it into a channel on the board. Not the talkback mic input, but an actual specific, just regular old channel on the board. Next, enable the compressor on the talkback mic channel. On the compressor, you want to use these settings. Turn the threshold all the way down, turn the ratio all the way up until it says limit, I think, and then use really fast attack and release. 5 milliseconds should work fine. Here's the key part of all this. There's a section to the right on the little screen that says key source. You want to select that, then turn the rotary dial all the way down to channel 32. That is telling the compressor to listen to channel 32 instead of listening to the talkback mic. We're using side chaining to trigger the compressor. Now go to your DAW and hit play. What happens? The talkback mic is now essentially muted. Here's how that works. When you press play in your DAW, the tone track sends a signal down channel 32. The compressor on the talkback mic channel hears that signal, and because it's set up to be as aggressive of a compressor as possible, it immediately turns down the talkback mic to as low as possible, essentially muting it. When you stop playback in your DAW, the signal stops coming down channel 32, which means the compressor lets go, and then you can talk again. Here's where it gets really fun. If you want to have multiple talkbacks, one for me, one for Joel, one for Tim, you can set all of those up, use the exact same process, set each one to trigger off of channel 32 as its compressor's key input, and now you've got multiple self-muting talkback mics. Now the next logical logical question is, why not just use the talkback feature on the board itself? It has a dedicated talkback input with a button for engaging the talkback on and off. Because, same reasons as before, I've got to remember to push that button, or I can leave it on all the time, which means we're going to hear that talkback while we're tracking, which isn't really ideal. Also, there's no way currently on the StudioLive to have a compressor or any other processing on the talkback channel, so we can't do this. Finally, we can only have one talkback mic on that system, whereas this, as long as we have a couple of free channels on the board that we're not using for anything else, we can have 2, 3, 4, 5 talkback mics all being triggered off of that tone track to shut off whenever playback is happening in the DAW. We've essentially treated this kind of like a gate, except I couldn't think of a good way to use a gate to do this. A gate relies on the presence of a signal to let signal through, but I wanted the opposite. I wanted when playback was happening for things to be turned off. And the only way to do that was with a really aggressive compressor triggered off of some sort of tone that will always play whenever playback is happening in the DAW. The next step of this is to figure out a way to have that same tone track trigger some sort of recording light that goes outside the door. I'm sure there's a device that'll do that, but you could use the same exact process to do that as well. If you know how to do it, let me know. We should figure that out. If you've got a StudioLive and a couple extra mics lying around, try it. It's super fun and you will feel like a super nerd. I love it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.